On tonight's video, we set the stage for the Final Four of the 2023 Bourbon Madness Tournament. Hello all, and welcome back to Lily Bees. On tonight's video, we have the last couple matchups of our second round, which would be the Elite 8 round of the tournament. And by the end of tonight, we're going to have our final 4 bottles set. So let's actually start tonight's video the way that we end a lot of these by taking a look at our bracket to see what the possibilities might be. So ending up with last week's video, we had 2 of our left side bottles set. That ended up being the Wild Turkey 101 Rye and the Willet 4-Year Family Estate Rye. Now moving over to the right side of your bracket, I'll tell you the 4 bottles we have remaining and the possibilities here. So we have 3 bourbons remaining and 1 rye remaining. And that's a good thing because, as you know, I like high proof rye, or I prefer that. And so it's a good thing that we don't have only rye possibilities remaining. It would just be kind of a bummer to have Bourbon Madness end in a rye. So our first matchup tonight is going to be the Jim Beam Repeal Batch bottle versus our Cedar Ridge Port Cask Rye. And then our second matchup of the night will have Blanton's versus our Maker's 46 Cask Strength. So taking a look at the possibilities, on the left side we have an under $30 rye represented and an over $30 rye with our Wild Turkey 101 and our Willet. And on the right side, the possibilities are we have 1 under $30 bourbon remaining, and the rest are 2 over $30 bourbons and 1 over $30 rye. So there's still a chance that our under $30, either in a rye or a bourbon, can win. And we also have the chance that an over $30 rye or bourbon can win the tournament. So that's a good thing. Those are the 4 bottles that we started out with, or the 4 categories, and there's still a chance that one of the 4 can take it. But as I've mentioned on previous videos, we also want to look at our second, third, fourth place, etc., because that might end up being the first place bottle of that given category. So if we have, for example, if Willet 4-Year Family Estate wins, that would be obviously our first place over $30 rye winner and the overall winner. But if second place is our Jim Beam Repeal Batch, that would be our first place under $30 bourbon bottle. So we're going to take a look at all of that either at the end of today's episode once the Final Four is set, or on the finals, and we'll talk more about that as well. So, getting right into it. We have our Jim Beam Repeal Batch. This is non-chill filtered, 86 proof, and is a bourbon. From Cedar Ridge, we have the Cedar Ridge Port Cask Finished Straight Rye. This is a straight rye whiskey finished in estate port wine casks and is 105 proof. And heads up, this is one of my favorites. So obviously, or maybe not so obvious, but it's going to be pretty easy to tell the difference between these two. And I'm going to do my best not to let knowing which is which, even though it's a blind tasting, I'm not going to let that determine who wins. So there's still a chance for either one of these bottles. Starting tonight with the taped glass. This has a very nice, deep and dark nose to it. There's a lot in there. There's not the ethanol alcohol burn that I get a lot of times. It's just immediately sweet and almost like a dark fruit of some sort. One thing that I've never really picked out of a bottle is cherry, and I've had a couple bottles recently where I'm starting to pick up on like a dark cherry flavor, and so that's kind of fun to discover new things. All right, let's take a sip here. Very nice. I have a guess of what this is, but as I mentioned, I'm going to leave that out of it. But one thing I like about this glass is it just continues to kind of grow as you take a sip. It's multi-dimensional and complex. I do notice that cherry flavor that I thought I smelled in there. A really nice dark sweetness to it. Let's take one more sip here. It's nice and thick and a little bit oily, so it coats your mouth very well. And the flavor just sticks around. So I'm a big fan of that one. Let's move over to the non-taped glass. Okay, so this one, right away to me, is kind of smoky in aroma. And some might say nutty or grainy. But to me, it's kind of like a tobacco-y, I don't want to say tobacco smoke, like off-putting, but there's just a dry, sort of a smoky, nutty smell to it. Let's take a taste. It's a little bit thinner than the first glass. Definitely get that same nutty taste that I'm smelling. It's definitely less complex than the first glass. Let's take a second sip and see if it's changed any here. Okay, still just a little bit thinner, but either one of these are low proof. Between the two is 86 proof here on the Jim Beam. And to me, if this were the Jim Beam, it tastes higher than 86 proof. But not in a heavy alcoholic sort of a way, just in I almost want to say in an aged, flavorful way. It doesn't taste thin or young or offensive at all, but there's less complexity going on from the non-taped glass to the taped glass. Let's go back here for one more taste. This has a nice, dark, rich, dark fruit. Oily and spicy, and I just keep using the word complex because there's a lot going on there. We'll go back one more time to the non-taped glass. Okay, that is definitely thinner. It's not bad, but it's nowhere near as good as the taped glass. And so my prediction and my winner is actually going to be just as these sit. I'm going to guess that the non-taped glass is the Jim Beam, and our winner for this matchup will be the taped glass, and my guess is that that's the Cedar Ridge Port Cask Rye. So let's move on to the second matchup. Okay, matchup number 2 of the night. We have Maker's 46 Cask Strength and Blanton's. Let's take a look at each of these bottles. We have 110.3 proof. This is Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey, barrel finished with oak staves, as is the 46 in general. This is just the cask strength version. And not a lot else on that one. And let's take a look at this little pony that made its way out of the stable. This is 93 proof, is a single barrel Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. Okay. Starting with the taped glass. Oh, that's nice. This has kind of a bright, light Maybe a light caramely, sort of it's hard to describe. There's I want to say orange peel or lemon or some light sort of citrus mixed with a creamy vanilla, but it's very light in aroma. Let's take a sip of that one. Oh yeah, that's good. It's very well rounded. It didn't burn nearly as much as I thought it would, which is kind of a surprise. I thought I had a guess based on the smell of what it was, but my guess was at a much higher proof than how this is drinking, and so that kind of throws me off. Very easy drinking. And there's a caramely vanilla and light citrus smell and taste on that one. Moving over to the non-taped glass. This one is a little bit darker in smell. We're moving away from that light, citrusy, bright smell into more of a dark, oaky sort of an aroma. Let's take a taste. And actually, now that I look at it, this one's a little darker in color as well. I've tried to kind of avoid looking at color as a way to identify which is which. This one's a little bit hot, excuse me, hotter than the last one. Oh, that's tough. This one's a little bit hotter, and it feels like the extra heat, which could be a proof-related thing, is overshadowing the flavors that I might get from that. And so I can taste the taped glass much better, but I'm going to let this sit a second and we'll come back to it so that I don't let that rule it out. So going back to the taped glass now, very bright, almost floral in aroma. Let's get another taste of that. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward, easy drinking, bright in flavor and aroma, which usually I wouldn't lean towards something like that. I like the darker, roasty, sort of double oaked, finished type stuff. I would say that this is kind of on the opposite end of that spectrum, where it's light, clean, well-rounded. Back to the non-taped glass one more time. Yeah, this one just continues to kind of grow. It's got that long finish, dark and maybe a little bit thicker in viscosity, a little more oily. And it's got those dark notes that I prefer. And so I think it is close. It's very close. Because this one to me is very quality, and I feel like a lot of people would like this because it's just got a more classic, well-rounded. You're getting all the stuff that you might want as far as the classic caramely, vanilla, and then a little bit of citrus in there. But tonight's winner, and I do prefer the non-taped glass. So I guess I'll give my guesses. Initially, right away my guess was that the taped glass was the maker's, but based on proof alone, I think I'm going to go the other way around. I'm going to say the non-taped glass was likely the maker's and is the winner for this matchup. Okay, so let's review, and then we'll also take a look at the brackets here. So from the first matchup, Jim Beam versus Cedar Ridge Port Cask, the winner was the Taped Glass, and my guess was that that was the Cedar Ridge Port Cask Rye.
That's correct.
Okay, and we'll set the stage for our final four here as well. So I've got these just off camera. The second matchup was our Blantons versus the Maker's 46 Cask Strength. My guess was that the winner was the Maker's 46 in the non-taped glass.
Correct again.
All right, 2 for 2. And I haven't looked things over, but it's not surprising that things are getting a little bit easier to identify because they're much more different than each other as we move along here. So let's set that aside. Sorry, Blantons fans, the Blantons is gone. And let's take a look at our final four that we've got set. So, coming from last week's video, in the upper left corner, we have our Wild Turkey 101 Rye, which is about a $25 to $30 bottle. I'm going to double check the MSRP on all of these before the finals. In the lower left, we have our Willett Family Estate Small Batch Rye 4-year. Hopefully you can see those. In our upper right-hand corner, sadly, the Jim Beam Repeal Batch is gone, but we'll take a look at what that means. And the winner there was the Cedar Ridge Port Cask Rye. And then finally, our most recent winner at the lower right of the bracket is our Maker's Mark Limited Edition 46 Cask Strength Bourbon. So, this is going to be tough because we've got 2 of my favorites at least, but 3 ryes versus 1 bourbon in the final 4. And what are the possibilities here? So, we have under $30, and the rest of these are over $30. So that would mean that our winner, our first place bottle, which is technically our 5th or 6th place bottle, not really sure, would be the Jim Beam Repeal Batch. This is our under $30 winner. And let me confirm that that's right. So Buffalo Trace also went out on last week's video, which you could say we could do a matchup between our kind of 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th place bottles. If you'd like to see that, let me know down below and we'll for sure do that. But at least at this point, this is right up there as far as our under $30 recommended bottles would be Jim Beam Repeal Batch. And I actually had this as a winner in I think 1 or 2 of my 3 brackets. So highly recommend this. I've seen it for as low as $17 in certain areas. So it's definitely worth giving it a try. Then, what else did we knock out? Our Old Bardstown Estate also went out last week. So that'd be kind of right up there in the 5th through 8th place. And that's also an under $30 bottle. So worth checking that out. If it's available, you might try it. But in my opinion, I haven't blinded them, but in my opinion, if you have Jim Beam Repeal Batch for, I think it's nearly half the price of the Old Bardstown Estate, I would go that way if it was me. In today's matchups, our knockouts were the Repeal Batch, the Blantons, which this is a bottle where, depending on the price, if you can find it, it's worth having. It's pretty cool. The story surrounding it, I'm a sucker for anything that comes with it. So you've got a story with it, you've got the tag, you've got the cool topper, the box, the bag, all that stuff. So this should be about a $60-ish bottle. And it's up to you. You can see this as high as maybe $150 or more. In my opinion, it's definitely not worth that. If it's something that's cool and special to you, then by all means, pay that. But it's fun. It's worth having one. It's very impressive. If people know or don't know bourbon and they see this, they're going to be pretty familiar with it because it's legendary. So in a blind, it did not win, but it did make it to the Elite 8 and was very close to the Final 4. So anyway, we'll see what happens. We have a couple possibilities in the Final 4. We have an under $30 bottle represented, and we have 3 over 30 with 1 bourbon remaining. And so that would mean our under $30 rye category is still available, but as I mentioned previously, the under $30 bourbon recommendation would be Jim Beam Repeal Batch. So stay tuned. We'll get to the Final 4 as soon as possible, and we may even mix that in with the finals. And so you'll have to let me know in the comments down below if you'd like to see these all in a live. There's been a suggestion to do that, to do a live video with our Final 4 and our finals. If it doesn't make any difference to you, then I guess don't leave a comment, or do, and we'll get that figured out. So thanks a lot for tuning in. Look forward to seeing you on the next video.